And I welcome Mr Colin Radford, our Chief Executive Officer of Comcare and related officials. Mr Radford, do you have an opening statement for us?
No, I don't, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Then Senator Kavasic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Bear with me for 30 seconds, if that is okay.
Congratulations.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I'm interested to understand if Comcare has undertaken an analysis of the review's recommendations, and I'm referencing the review of the Safety Rehabilitation and Compensation Act, recommendation to establish an early payments and support system for all injuries, including compensation for incapacity, medical expenses and rehabilitation with no caps on entitlements.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. As I think you'd be aware, the department is leading the government's response. We will engage with the department throughout that process, but the department will hold the pen, if I could use that term, in terms of advising government. What I would say is that at Comcare we do want a scheme that is modern, fit for purpose, and supports injured workers who are often at their most vulnerable. So we're very supportive of the review's objectives, but in terms of the government's response, that is sitting with the department, not with Comcare.
Okay, I do understand that, but have you done any of your own analysis in relation to that, or that's not necessary given that you don't have carriage of it?
Yeah, we haven't done analysis of the individual 124 recommendations in that regard. We did make a public submission to the review, which is available.
Of course.
That predates me as CEO, so if you have questions about our submission, I'll defer to my Deputy CEO. But no, we haven't analysed each of the 124 recommendations.
Have you done any modelling on the financial impact of removing the caps on the entitlements under such a system?
I'd have to take that on notice. As part of the review, there was some actuarial modelling done of individual recommendations. As I understand it, I don't know if that is one of the ones that's had any modelling done, but I will take it on notice. Okay,
that would be great. Thank you. Has Comcare developed or been asked to develop guidelines to determine whether an injury was sustained like during an interval, so whether that's like while working from home or while travelling to work or while working away from the usual place of work and is taken to be in the course of normal employment? Have you been asked to do analysis over those three different scenarios or any other scenarios for that matter?
No, we haven't, Senator.
Okay. So you wouldn't have... Okay, so and you haven't done any of that analysis of your own accord over time?
Not that I'm aware of, but as I said, I apologise. I've been the CEO since November.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So I will ask Mr Duke, who was the acting CEO during the review period.
Of course.
Hi, Senator. Michael Duke, the General Manager of Strategy. We might have to take that on notice whether we've done any in the past, but we haven't done any specifically related to recommendations that came out of the SRC Act review.
Okay. So would you expect that those are some of the guidelines that might be developed? Would that be sort of some things that we probably should be looking at, or that you would sort of be drawing your mind to as something that the department should consider?
Well, as I understand it, the department is looking at the whole 124 recommendations to develop. I think the term that was used was a package for consideration of government, but we're not directly involved in the process of analysing each of the recommendations.
Okay, I'm aware. I was just curious whether you had any sort of core areas or primary areas of concern that you would relay to them as something that you would encourage them to look at. And I recognise it's not your remit and it's not your job to do it, but I'm just curious about that.
No, not at this point. And I think how I would respond to that, Senator, is ultimately the government will determine what, if any, legislative changes are required, and our role as the agency is to then implement those changes. But no, we're not offering views on individual recommendations.
Thank you. Are you able to tell me, either now or on notice, how many workers' compensation claims Comcare has received in the past 3 financial years that relate specifically to injuries sustained while working from home?
I would have to take that on notice, Senator.
And if you could provide a comparison then on notice of how those compare to claims arising from injuries sustained at a usual workplace over that same period, if that is okay?
So if I can just clarify, so the same 3-year period?
Yep, for both from home and then the
Yes.
usual workplace.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Has Comcare assessed whether expanding coverage for interval and work from home injuries would lead to a material increase in claim volumes or scheme costs?
No, we haven't modelled that.
Okay. Is that something that you may look at to modelling as sort of future-proofing, I guess?
Well, I think it would depend on what work is done as part of the response to the review, whether
it necessitates it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Has Comcare undertaken any work in relation to the review's recommendation to introduce the concept of a liable employer for return to work obligations? And I note you have said that you haven't looked in detail at any of the recommendations, but would this one be the same?
Yes, well, we have looked at the recommendation. So I should be clear, we have looked at the recommendations, but we've not analysed individual recommendations.
Okay. What additional compliance or administrative burdens on employers has Comcare identified arising from the proposed liable employer framework?
Again, we haven't looked at it.
Not necessary. Okay.
Yep.
Have you been asked to provide any feedback or input into requirements for employers returning injured employees to work?
Not beyond what the current requirements
are.
So
no new work, no new modelling, nothing at all?
No.
Okay.
I believe where the department is looking to do some more consultation with stakeholders, I think is the next step in the process. And so at this point, we've not been asked to look at a package, individual recommendations that may come in the future. But again, it would be us providing some subject matter expertise to the department in terms of their advice to government.
Okay. So in addition to that, you would have return to work. If there was an introduction of return to work inspectors, the department hasn't asked you to look at the costing of that for Comcare and any associated enforcement powers?
Not at this point, no, Senator.
So is it your view that that will happen later? Because obviously these are all things that will impact Comcare and your operating model and your operational costs?
So in terms of each of the recommendations or a package of recommendations, the work on whether it's actuarial modelling or cost-benefit analysis will be led by the department. Mm-hmm. In terms of our operating costs, Senator, we're a cost-recovered agency, so we recover our claims expenses through premium and through regulatory fees and licence fees is how we fund our regulatory activities.
So then effectively if the cost of meeting the requirements of any of the changes that are implemented, they will come through increased premiums? And
not necessarily, because it will depend on what the package is.
Right.
And my understanding is the objective is that whatever the package is net neutral, and the expectation would be, as I understand it, that some of the recommendations will lead to reduced claims costs, which in turn leads to reduced premiums. So in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, there are some recommendations, if they're adopted, which may be offset by other recommendations which improve return to work rates or accelerate return to work rates, for example.
Okay. Do you have any awareness of what any of the proposed penalties are for breaches of return to work obligations?
I do not know.
No? Okay, thank you. Has Comcare provided any advice to the Minister or the Department on whether the combined effect of any recommendations would materially increase employer costs or scheme liabilities?
No, we have not.
Okay. And is that modelling that you would intend to do at some point?
Well, I think
I know you've talked about it with the other elements, but I just want to understand with each piece.
The modelling any modelling that would be done will be done as part of the department's work to inform government. It won't be done separately by Comcare.
Yeah, so you don't need to do any of that because whatever the department will do all of it, and whatever the costs are to you, you will recover those through the regulatory costs and the premiums.
Well, I can't answer that, Senator, because I don't know what, at this point, I don't know what the department will model, and I don't know what any impact or benefit might be. So I simply can't answer what any potential impact on premium or regulatory contributions or activity, in fact, would be at this point.
But if there is an increased pressure on your resourcing and an increased requirement for you to, have more people or to do more work, then given that you are a cost recovery model, that would need to come from somewhere because you don't have your own resourcing. Is that correct?
No, without knowing what the envelope is that we're operating within, it may, if there was a change in priorities or our activity, it may come from internal changes as well. Like there's a whole range of different ways that we would operationalise any changes that the government asks us to implement.
Okay, so effectively you won't know anything until the department finalises its work and its modelling, and then you'll know what impact it has on Comcare.
Well, I don't think we'll know until we know what the government's response is
to that,
to the review.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. On that basis, Chair, I have no other questions.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our questions for Comcare, so
right,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll now call officials from Safe Work Australia to the table. Good evening.
You too, thank you.
So I welcome officials from Safe Work Australia and its Chief Executive Officer, Ms Marie Boland. Do you have an opening statement for us?
I don't, Senator. Thank you.
Great. Senator Kavasic, you have the call.
Thank you. I'm going to ask some questions around exposure limits for chemicals. Could you please update us on where the current DRIS process is up to and how many proposed changes to the workplace exposure limits or wells for 9 chemicals were reached?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I might ask Dr Newton to respond to that question. She's been managing that process. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Rebecca Newton, Branch Manager, Safe Work Australia. So in January this year, we provided the decision regulation impact statement to all of the 9 work health and safety ministers. We have not yet received responses from them on decisions on the chemicals that are contained in that decision res.
When are you expecting those, or do you have a time frame for when you might anticipated expectation for those responses?
It's a matter for ministers to determine when they're going to respond.
Okay. Have any of them given you an indication of when they might respond to you?
We haven't received any communication from ministers yet, Senator.
From any of them? What date in January was that?
I just need to check.
Oh, thank you.
Senator, I believe it was the 19th of January.
Thank you. So it's not that long. Yeah, perfect. Would you be able to outline for me the process by which the SWA determines whether a proposed well is both health-based and practically achievable, and how you ensure that the health benefits are clearly justified?
So, Senator, this process for reviewing workplace exposure standards, as they were called and are becoming workplace exposure limits, started in 2015 with a number of initial pieces of work, which led to an initial decision regulation impact statement which was provided to ministers, where they agreed the approach that we would take to review over 600 workplace exposure standards. So in that was agreed methodology, which determined the sources of information that we would use. So both primary and secondary sources were agreed to look at the available health evidence. We undertook an external reviewer to look at that evidence from those sources and determine the appropriate workplace exposure limit that would be protective of health effects for the majority of workers. And then we undertook from there to publish those findings through a series of evaluation reports throughout 2019 to 2021. Through that process, we received stakeholder feedback. We received over 1,100 submissions to that consultation, and the outcomes of that consultation, together with the evaluation reports, were provided to Safe Work Australia members for them to decide what they would recommend to work health and safety ministers. Thank you.
There have been some concerns raised by multiple stakeholders during the public consultation process about the robustness of evidence for several chemicals. What steps has Safe Work Australia taken to strengthen the evidence base supporting the proposed workplace exposure limits?
Thank you, Senator. As part of the consultation, where information was provided to us around health-based evidence, we looked at that through the agreed methodology that Work Health and Safety Ministers had agreed in 2019. So it had to meet certain criteria around its credibility, robustness, whether it had been peer-reviewed itself, etc. There were a few criteria. And we looked at the health evidence. And in some cases, if there was newer evidence that met that criteria, we then looked to propose or recommend an alternative approach if that influenced the previous recommendation.
How would Safe Work Australia respond to a call for a chemical-by-chemical approach to the workplace exposure limits decision-making rather than the package approach that we're currently seeing for all 9 chemicals under review?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I can take that.
Whoever is the appropriate person.
Yeah, I can answer that, Senator. Look, at this stage, we've basically done what ministers have asked us to do, and as Dr. Newton has said, this is a process that has been going on since 2015. All of that methodology that Dr. Newton described, the robustness of it, the methodology, the sources, has all been approved all along the way by Work Health and Safety Ministers. And so this is the pointy end of it with these 9 chemicals. So Work Health and Safety Ministers have now asked us to do this extra decision regulation impact statement for the 9 chemicals. So that's what we were asked to do, so we've given it to them as a package.
Right.
So beyond that, I guess it's now up to Work Health and Safety Ministers to come back to us.
To come back to you and ask?
Well, just with their response, I guess, to the DRIS. Yeah.
Are there other jurisdictions where there are visible benefits from a chemical-by-chemical approach rather than the way that we currently do it with a package approach? Which would be sort of
clarifying that the decision RIS itself, while it's one document, there are chapters that specify the details for each chemical because they're obviously very different. They are used by different industries. The health impacts are different. So we're quite aware that they're very different, and ministers are, able to make a different decision on each chemical if they want to. So they may agree to. So there's 2 options in the decision RIS. They may go with option 1 for benzene and option 2 for copper, for example.
So being packaged together should have no net detrimental effect.
That's
to the
right.
way something is assessed if it were assessed on its own, as they say, by chemical approach. So if you could help me understand then, why would some stakeholders be seeking that? What is the advantage of doing it that way as opposed to the current approach?
Yes, Senator, I'm not clear if stakeholders, because as Ms Wallbank has said, the decision regulatory impact statement document that's been provided to ministers, it's quite a large document because each chemical has been considered individually.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a package, the package is just that. The work that's been done
on the means of delivery,
exactly.
As opposed
yeah,
to,
it's the means of delivery, and also the response to the request by ministers. So, as Dr. Newton identified, there were like how many hundreds of chemicals that we started with. Yeah. We've worked through the process on up to the last 9, I guess, and so we were asked to package these up for a regulatory impact statement. But within that statement, they've been considered chemical by chemical, and so the document that ministers are considering is chemical by chemical.
So would there be a delay then in doing it all together? Is that perhaps what the issue is? Like, is it slower to get that reporting based on how long some, I'm assuming some may take a shorter period of time to assess than others, or perhaps not? Could that be part of the challenge?
I'm not sure because, again, as Ms Wallbank has identified, basically the ministers are being posed the question of option 1 or option 2 for each chemical. So although it's a lot of material, I guess the decision is in some way straightforward, and the evidence is, the material is there and the work has been done. So, yes.
Thank you. I also understand that a number of stakeholders have requested further justification and clarity on proposed workplace exposure limits for a number of chemicals. What additional information or analysis, if any, is Safe Work Australia providing to address these concerns, or are you actually aware of those concerns?
We, because as part of the process, we provided a draft of the decision regulatory impact statement to members, which I believe is not usual in these processes, but we wanted to give our members a chance to talk to their stakeholders. So they had a good look at that draft. They came back with concerns from their stakeholders, and we addressed them. And we worked with the Office of Impact Analysis, and we're confident that the Office of Impact Analysis verified and approved the DRIS, and yes, as I said, we took on board. We had significant consultation through the whole process since 2015, and so all along that journey, we've been consulting and taking on board stakeholder feedback. Yeah.
What mechanisms are in place to ensure the practicality and enforceability of reduced workplace exposure limits, especially when it's been argued that levels are immeasurable, such as those for respirable crystalline silica, hydrogen sulfide and titanium dioxide?
Yeah, look, we're satisfied, Senator, that the capability exists in Australia for accurate measurement of all of the 9 chemicals in the DRIS. For each of the chemicals, multiple methods have been identified to measure with sufficient confidence to assess compliance with the workplace exposure limit. In terms of practicality and providing assistance to people, we have a working group operating at the moment that's working on a really comprehensive practical guidance for businesses and workers to understand it. I don't know whether Dr. Newton, you want to talk about the technical guidance, because I think that would be really key to helping people.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, as Ms Moland said, we're developing a very comprehensive technical guidance with a lot of experts as part of our working group, and that is really trying to provide that clarity around how you undertake the air monitoring that's required to measure it and what you need to do in terms of improving sampling and analysis for that measurement.
Thank you. We are aware of some concerns expressed by the pathology industry, for example, that if the workplace exposure limits for formaldehyde were to be reduced to the proposed level, perhaps cancer diagnoses and other medical procedures could be significantly disrupted. Are you aware of these concerns and have they been addressed?
So we have considered those requests, those concerns, that was feedback that was provided to us through the consultation processes, and that was taken into consideration. So the initial proposal, the health-based limit that was originally proposed, was an even lower level than what is proposed now, and we undertook to do some further evaluation to see whether there was scope to still have a health-based limit that was perhaps higher than the one that was originally proposed through the expert evaluation in 2019. And that's how we've landed at the 0.3 parts per million.
Thank you. And my last question, are you comfortable with where you're sitting now in relation to the decision has met the standards and requirements set by the Office of Impact Analysis, particularly regarding transparency, evidence strength or the consideration of regulatory impacts? Because, again, some stakeholders have expressed concerns about that.
Thanks, Senator, for that question. Absolutely confident about our approach to this DRIS. As I said, we've worked really closely with the Office of Impact Analysis throughout the whole process. We, in terms of transparency, we gave a draft which we wanted to do to reinforce that transparency to members. We gave permission for members to distribute it more broadly to their stakeholders so that they could consult. As I say, we had lots of conversations with the OIA, Office of Impact Analysis, and yes, they've done all proper process, and it was ticked off by them as being compliant, and so absolutely confident in that our approach. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you for your time this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our questions for Safe Work Australia, so you're free to depart. And I now call officials from the Australian Skills Quality Authority. All right, welcome, Ms Rice. Do you have an opening statement?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to go straight to questions.
Great. All right, Senator Kovacic, you've got the call.
Thank you so much. I'm interested in the cancelled qualifications, and I would like to get an understanding in as much detail as you are able to provide to me the primary reason why the 30,095 individual qualifications were cancelled by ASQA.
Certainly, Senator. Thank you for the question. This has been an ongoing program of work for ASQA for more than 12 months now, and it's focused specifically on the integrity of individual qualifications. It's a program associated with our work to disrupt and remove from the sector non-genuine providers and bad faith operators. So the work that we've undertaken is in connection with all of that. It's also connected to our participation in the Fraud Fusion Task Force. So our findings, generally speaking, our findings in relation to each of these matters, which includes, we've now cancelled 16 unrelated RTOs since the end of 2024, and that's really been primarily focused on ensuring public confidence in the qualifications that are gained through Australia's vet sector. And it's the work related to those 16, specifically those 16 RTOs, that we have then moved to consider the integrity of the individual qualifications issued typically within a particular period by each of those providers. And we have now issued more than 36,000 600 notices of intent to cancel qualifications.
So was that 36,600?
That's right.
Is that on top of the 30,095, or is that in total?
No, sorry. So the 36,603 in total, as at the 31st of December, are notices of intent to those individuals that we were considering the integrity of those qualifications. As at the same date, the 31st of December 2025, we had cancelled the qualifications and or statements of attainment of 30,095 individuals.
So in total, if those notices of intent are followed through with, it'll be some 67,500 qualifications. Is that right?
Apologies, Senator. So in total, it's 36,600 we've issued. Of those 36,600, we've now cancelled just over 30,000.
Yeah, gotcha. So there's some 5,000 left. Yeah, if you follow through.
We're still in the process of considering those, and given that's end of December data, I think we've worked through a few more of those since then, but just keeping the data sets consistent. But I would say this is, as I mentioned at the outset, an ongoing program of work focus for us. So we certainly have concerns for a number of further providers and the qualifications that they have issued.
Okay. How many formal complaints has ASQA received from students affected by the cancelled qualifications, and how many additional informal inquiries or grievances have been lodged with ASQA in relation to the qualifications or the notices of intent?
I might have to take some of the specifics of that question on notice,
sure,
Senator.
That's not a problem.
What I can tell you is we have engaged individually with all of those individuals concerned, offered procedural fairness as we would ordinarily in relation to indicating the concerns we had about the issuance of the qualification, offering those individuals an opportunity to respond, and we take into consideration those individual responses in our decision making. We have various rates of response that we have had from those individuals, but of the 30,000 or just over 30,000 individual qualifications or statements of attainment that we have cancelled, in terms of those that have sought merits review of those decisions, I'll just get those details for you. In total, we have had... I'll have to provide you the totals on notice so as I don't give you the wrong total, but we have 44 active matters from individuals on foot currently in the Administrative Review Tribunal. We have had an additional 17 withdraw their application, and a further 18 had their matters dismissed. But that's the total number of individuals that have sought merits review of our decision.
How long does it roughly take for you to complete an assessment once you've provided that notice of intent? So how long is an average student waiting to find out an outcome? Again, for the specifics, I'm happy to take that on notice, sure. But I know that certainly where we have had concerns in relation to public safety, where some of these qualifications have been issued in areas like early childhood, individual support, aged care, we've certainly seen the urgency with which we have needed to consider those matters and provide those responses. So we have stood up a specific team in order to undertake that work as quickly as possible, given the nature of the issues that we're concerned about. Thank you. Have you done any modelling, or do you have an estimate of the total financial cost borne by students whose qualifications were cancelled? And that covers obviously tuition fees, materials, perhaps even living costs, which are hard for you to estimate, but just to get an understanding of what the economic cost of these sort of failed qualifications or cancelled qualifications are. We haven't done any specific modelling, Senator, and that's largely because it's potentially incredibly difficult. What we have seen, though, and I can perhaps provide you with some further detail, but what we've generally seen in a lot of these matters is there's a
variety in terms of the responses we've had from individual students, very significant variety of how much each of those individuals might have paid for the qualification. We know that there are professional facilitators and brokers that have facilitated some of this, and therefore there's various costs associated there. But it's very difficult to potentially model or have any deeper consideration when we've also had such overall, I guess, not an overall significant response from those individuals to truly understand those broader costs that you
actually aren't getting access to information, or you don't have the ability to access information as to how much the individual students have paid for these courses?
No, certainly not with any great certainty.
Are you finding that affected students are trying to gain refunds from ASQA? Like, obviously there is no capacity to do that, but, are they coming to you thinking they can get a refund? Are people coming seeking for avenues for compensation? Are you seeing that type of activity at all? And are any of them seeking them from the education providers themselves? And if you have an awareness of if there's any success there?
We don't have a great awareness of that. I know in relation to one matter, we were considering, we had engaged with that provider around their providing refunds to those individuals, but that provider never actually undertook that work. We have certainly provided a variety of information to individuals affected in terms of supporting their understanding of the avenues they have through which to consider essentially the consumer protection aspects of the work. It hasn't specifically, or not in any great volume, been raised with an expectation of ASQA. One of the other aspects to this, it's probably worth clarifying equally, is I believe it's only one of these providers was actually CRICOS registered and therefore delivering to international students. The one that provider that was CRICOS registered, it wasn't in fact the delivery that was occurring to international students that we were concerned about. It was a different data set that we held those concerns for, but the reason I say that is because that if it were in that space, the tuition protection service would be available to those students, but that's not the kind of issues that we're seeing here from an international student delivery perspective. It's primarily providers who are only registered to deliver to domestic students.
I was just about to ask that question. Do you have the data or the stats on what the percentage is for domestic students versus international students in relation to the cancelled qualifications so far?
I might again take that one on notice, Senator. We have worked with Home Affairs in relation to some of that data, and I know that there was some analysis of that, but I don't have the detail to hand, but I'm happy to take that on notice.
Thank you for provide that on notice. What mechanisms are currently in place to assist students, if any, in recovering fees from deregistered or sanctioned providers outside of, whether someone goes to a small claim or something like that? Are there any sort of processes to assist them?
It's not so much. I guess in the context of all of the information that we're providing the individuals, it's also making sure that they're also aware of other avenues through which they can both seek an RPL process, which is primarily the way in which most of these qualifications were marketed as being RPL processes. So the genuine avenues through which those individuals could seek a legitimate RPL process in order to have their skills or experience considered in a proper assessment process.
Some of the questions that we've seen and that come to us relate to, how and why were these providers allowed to continue to operate for long enough to issue 30,095 qualifications, and perhaps another 6,500 more before regulatory intervention occurred. And were there any missed warning signals that you're now aware of within ASQA's compliance framework? Like, what learnings do we have from what we've seen here?
It's a really good question, Senator, and there's certainly been many or a lot of consideration, and we undertake a very deep and thorough environmental scan on an annual basis that informs our regulatory risk priorities. And essentially the nature of this work arose through that deep consideration and participation in other forums, as I say, including the Fraud Fusion Task Force, that helped to identify this behaviour. It is, in the context of the Fraud Fusion Task Force, also worth noting that it is also a connection between this behaviour and other fraudulent activity, including across other government payment programs, and that's really where we've got that dedicated focus through Fraud Fusion. So it's been the broader understanding, including in our work across the Commonwealth, that's helped to identify these practices, and us working more effectively together across agencies has certainly helped for us to collaboratively deal with these issues, particularly where it might not also be best for ASQA to perhaps be taking certain action, but another agency or law enforcement, in fact. So we, I guess in that sense, have responded to the identification of those risks, and there is a strong connection here to serious organised crime, and it is in that context that we have been responding more in a coordinated way across both Commonwealth and state and territory agencies, other regulators and law enforcement. So we're certainly working through how we also now are more effective at prevention measures as well as the response that's needed.
So effectively they're an element of perhaps broader organised crime models and organised crime businesses effectively?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to tell me now or on notice what proportion of these cancellations relate to providers that have previously been flagged or audited or investigated by ASQA, and whether perhaps any earlier compliance action could have perhaps prevented the harm sort of being more widespread? Are there things that you have identified that could have been done sooner?
I'm happy to take that on notice,
sure.
Senator. One of the comments I would make in that context, and one of the behaviours that we've certainly seen or identified throughout the course of this work, is changes of ownership of those providers. So in the context of whatever information we can provide you specifically in the relation to the question, there's also certainly the risk being identified around changes of ownership.
Sure. And one more and then next block. Perfect, thank you. What reforms has ASQA implemented or planning to implement since these cancellations to sort of create an environment where we actually don't see this happening again?
Again, thank you for the question, Senator, because that's absolutely right in terms of such a significant component of the work that we undertake around supporting the vast majority of the sector who are certainly capable and committed to delivering quality training. So we've supported the transition to and now the embedding of the 2025 standards for RTOs, and that's a significant change for the sector, but also a significant program of work for ASQA to really support those providers to build that capability and capacity from a quality perspective. And equally, I think, as I referred to earlier, the preventive measures that we're looking at a whole of Commonwealth level, that in order to strengthen and tighten the frameworks, and including, there was some recent, feels recent, it probably wasn't actually that recent, now legislative change to our the NVR Act, which helped to tighten up things like fit and proper person requirements, as well as some other specific integrity measures that were holistically looking at the way in which we can ensure that there is that confidence in by all stakeholders in the vet sector and the qualifications issued by training providers.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Roberts, you have the call.
Thank you, and thank you for appearing tonight. Good evening.
Good evening.
My question is pretty brief, so you're almost finished. I understand by the end of 2025, ASCA deregistered 11 critically non-compliant registered training organisations and 31,000 qualifications they had issued affecting 25,000 people. Is this accurate, and is it the latest data?
Senator, the latest data is that as at the 31st of December 2025, we have cancelled 16 critically non-compliant providers, and we have issued notices of intent to cancel qualifications or statements of attainment to more than 36,600 individuals, and of that figure, we have cancelled the qualifications and or statements of attainment of just over 30,000 individuals.
How many qualifications? 30,000 people. How many qualifications? 37, roughly? 37,000?
It's 36,600. Yeah. We've issued a notice of intent to individuals. So
that's in addition to the 30,000 you've cancelled?
No, sorry. It's a subset. So it's 36,600, and of that 36,600, just over 30,000 we have actually cancelled. That's as at the 31st of December 2025.
Thank you. Your enforcement team investigated 189 serious matters involving 154 providers, with 74% relating to serious fraud. Wouldn't they all be committing fraud? They're handing over a certificate that they knew was improperly issued and kept the money the student paid for the tuition. Shouldn't they all have been charged with fraud?
Those are investigations on foot, Senator, and so the current data in relation to that is we have I believe it's 201 serious matters currently under investigation relating to 136 providers. The difference in there is because we also have serious matters under investigation in relation to non-RTOs or individuals or joint investigations with other partner agencies or law enforcement. And I guess it's preemptive we certainly have concerns in relation to fraud in relation to all of those matters, but they're all at various stages of investigation.
So you can't categorise them yet?
No, that's right.
Okay, so I'm on the right track. I can see the cancellations in the CRICOS panel.
Yes.
But where are the changes for fraud on the owners, managers? Where are the charges for fraud on the owners, managers, administrators of these companies? That's
a good question, Senator. We have undertaken a number of civil and criminal prosecutions or worked certainly with the CDPP, so we don't bring those matters ourselves. And
you don't run them yourself?
No, the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions does, so we work in terms of providing a brief around some of those matters. It probably also, though, relates to, in many of these cases, we have certainly made adverse findings from a fit and proper person perspective as part of the investigations, and that is certainly relevant in order to, again, work with other partner agencies around the implications of that. It's also important in terms of preventing their re-entry into the vet sector, but it remains an ongoing program of work in relation to the individuals associated with this work.
So once it's completed, the names will come out?
Typically, there will be names associated with the cancellation decisions that we've...
the officers of companies, administrators, managers, they'll be exposed.
And we work closely with ASIC and other regulators from that perspective, the ATO.
Okay, thank you. Some of the RTOs were running obvious scams. One sold the qualifications for cash. How many others were dealing in cash? And was any of this reported to the ATO for tax fraud?
It's certainly all of the matters that we have dealt with in this space, we have shared our intelligence and information with our Fraud Fusion partners, which includes the Tax Office.
What partners did you call them?
The Fraud Fusion Task Force partners.
What is to stop these people opening up another RTO ad, running the same but this time different, having learned how not to get caught?
Well, Senator, we are certainly very alert to the risk of individuals re-entering the market, and that's where we've been particularly focused and including the reforms to the fit and proper person requirements so that we can be alert to individuals as much as entities seeking...
Track individuals?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
And we've also been uplifting our focus and assessment of market entrants, and it remains a significant area of focus for us. We're also alert to it, though, from the perspective of, as I just mentioned earlier, in relation to the change of ownership of RTOs.
Thank you. Did you seize any money from the fraudulent RTOs as proceeds of crime?
No, Senator. That would be for law enforcement.
That's what I expected. Did you report it to the police?
So again, I guess we have certainly informed our Fraud Fusion partners about
who are they?
All of our, there's 22, I think, Fraud Fusion partners, but it certainly includes the ATO ASIC, the ACIC, NDIA, and our portfolio department in DUA. I can certainly provide you with the
government departments.
That's right. I can certainly provide you with the list of members and the terms of reference for the task force on notice.
If you could, please. But why not the police? Because that would put these criminals behind bars.
Well, certainly in some cases, Senator, we've worked with state law enforcement in relation to some of those matters, but if it would assist, Senator, I'm happy to come back to you on notice around some more of the specifics from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Has the Education Legislation Amendment, Integrity and Other Measures Bill 2025 that was passed last year made it easier to deal with rogue RTOs, or is it too early to tell?
It's a good question, Senator. I think it is part of a suite of the integrity measures. So together with those other, the other measures, it certainly helped to ensure greater alignment between the two areas of the two pieces of legislation that we deal with most in the ESOS Act and the NVR Act. That certainly created a lot of, ensured the consistency between those two acts from an integrity perspective. So we're working through the implementation of that and certainly supportive of those changes.
Thank you. Chair, I want to put it on the record that for the second time today, I'm going to compliment someone for the answers they put. Prompt, clear and concise. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Good to see someone on top.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Kovacic, I'll return the call to you. Thank you, Senator Roberts.
Thank you. I just have a small set left and then everyone can go home.
And Senator, I have an answer to the question you asked earlier about the number of matters that had sought review in the ART in total of individuals that we had cancelled the statements of attainment or qualifications, and that is in excess of 55 in total, but we have 44 currently active.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can the authority confirm the current status of Ms Rice's appointment as the CEO, noting that ASQA's website, which is you, states that you were appointed from the 1st of January for those 5 years?
I will take that on notice to update our website, but my appointment is through until the 30th of June 2027.
Oh, okay. So perfect. So that just needs to be updated. Perfect.
It does.
So that was renewed when?
I believe it was the 5th of December 2025.
Perfect. And I'm happy to take all these on notice if that's easier.
I will correct that if it is if I got that date wrong.
Perfect. Is there an indication as to whether that will be ongoing, or if there will be another extension, or if there is going to be another recruitment process? Or you haven't been provided that information yet? Sorry, it's a bit awkward to be asking you these questions directly, sorry.
That is, I guess my only response is that any appointments are a matter for the government.
Of course, yes, but you haven't been given any information in relation to that?
Just my most recent reappointment that I certainly accepted.
Wonderful. That is it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our questions for... Sorry. Yes, you're right. Yep, that concludes our questions for the Australian Skills Quality Authority and indeed for the day. So thank you all for your participation in today's hearing. I'll remind the committee that any written questions or notice should be lodged with the Secretariat by Thursday the 9th of April 2026. But thank you to all witnesses who appeared, Hansard Broadcasting and our Secretariat for their assistance. The committee stands adjourned.